Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're getting right into real-world data, RWD.
Yep, RWD, and how it's really starting to shake things up in health and medicine.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we know you want the insights, quickly but also thoroughly. So think of this as your fast track.
A shortcut to understanding something pretty crucial in health innovation today.
So think about how new treatments usually come about, clinical trials, right?
Right. Absolutely vital, of course. But they are, by design, very controlled, very specific environments.
Yeah, very specific. So you might have a new drug that looks amazing in trials, great results, seems straightforward.
But those trials, they often involve, let's say, a pretty narrow slice of the population.
Exactly. Then it gets out into the real world, used by, well, everybody else, people with different health issues, different lifestyles.
A much, much broader group.
And suddenly the picture gets maybe a little more complicated.
Yeah, it can. Maybe it doesn't work quite the same way for everyone.
Or, maybe a really rare side effect pops up, something you just wouldn't see in a smaller trial group.
Or, and this happens too, maybe you start seeing unexpected benefits, things the trial wasn't even looking for.
And that's kind of the magic of RWD, isn't it? It lets us see all that real-world stuff. The messy reality that trials, well, they often miss.
Precisely. It captures those nuances.
And this isn't just theory. I mean, remember that diabetes drug example?
Oh yeah, that's a classic one. Early trials hinted at heart benefits, but nothing definitive.
Right. But then researchers looked at RWD. We're talking millions, literally millions, of electronic health records, insurance claims.
A massive amount of data.
And that analysis, well, it showed really significant cardiovascular protection across a way broader group of patients,
It wasn't just a small effect either. It was powerful enough to actually change treatment guidelines.
which impacts so many people.
Yeah.
That's the kind of aha moment RWD can deliver.
Yeah.
A fuller, richer picture of what really happens with treatments out there.
So that's our mission for this deep dive, right?
Yep, you're going to unpack what RWD actually is,
Where it comes from.
how it's changing health research, the revolution part.
And also, importantly, the challenges. Because it's not always simple.
Definitely not. It's about understanding health through, like, the lens of everyday life.
Okay, so RWD, real-world data. What exactly is it, formally speaking?
The textbook definition talks about data on patient health status
Yeah.
or healthcare delivery.
Right, and crucially, it's data that's collected routinely, not specifically for a research study, usually.
But maybe a better way to picture it is like a constellation.
Mm.
A whole bunch of different information streams coming together.
That's a good way to put it, a constellation. Each stream gives a different angle.
Okay, so let's map out this constellation. What are the main stars? Where's the data coming from? Electronic health records, EHRs.
EHRs are definitely a cornerstone. These are the digital versions of patient charts.
So diagnoses, medications, lab results.
Exactly. Doctor's notes, maybe discharge summaries from hospitals. It's a pretty rich history of a patient's journey through the healthcare system.
But it's not all neat and tidy data, is it?
No, not at all. Some of it is structured, clearly defined fields like diagnosis codes, numeric lab values. That's relatively easy to analyze.
Okay.
But a huge amount of really valuable information is in the unstructured parts.
Like the notes doctors write, free text.
Precisely. And getting insights out of that, well, that takes more advanced tools, things like natural language processing, NLP, teaching computers to actually understand the language.
Right, so you need tech to unlock that narrative gold.
Yeah.
Okay, so structured data, unstructured notes, and EHRs. What else?
Next up, claims and billing data.
Ah, the insurance company side of things.
Exactly. This is the data collected for payment purposes.
Yeah.
Tells you about which treatments were given, where people received care, and importantly, the costs involved.
So maybe less clinical detail than an EHR sometimes.
Often, yes, it might lack that really granular clinical information, but its strength is its sheer scale.
Right.
Claims data can cover enormous populations, often over many, many years, so it's fantastic for big picture health economics research or tracking how treatment patterns change over time across the country, for example.
Got it. High-level view, massive scale.
Right.
What about hearing directly from patients themselves?
That brings us to patient-reported outcomes, PROs.
Okay.
This is information coming straight from the source, the patient, no clinician interpretation in the middle.
So things like their symptoms, how they're feeling, quality of life.
Exactly that. Functional status, maybe their experience with the treatment, often collected via surveys or apps.
And why is that so important?
Well, sometimes what the clinical numbers say doesn't fully match how the patient is actually experiencing their health or the treatment. PROs capture that lived experience. It's absolutely critical for understanding the real impact.
Yeah, that makes total sense. You need both sides. Okay, what about all the tech we carry around now? Wearables, apps?
Ah, yes. Wearable technology and mobile health apps. That's another huge and growing source of RWD.
Smartwatches, fitness trackers.
Yep. Continuously monitoring things like heart rate, activity, sleep, even blood glucose for some devices.
It's like a constant stream of data from outside the clinic.
It is an unprecedented window into health and behavior in daily life. Real-time dynamic insights. It's quite different from the snapshots you get during a doctor's visit.
Definitely. Are there other, maybe newer sources emerging?
There are things like social media and other digital health platforms are being explored.
I can see challenges there, though. Noise, privacy.
Oh, absolutely. Requires very careful handling, lots of noise, big privacy questions. But sometimes they might offer early clues about public health trends or how patients feel about certain treatments.
It's interesting. Anything else?
We should also mention disease registries. These are specific databases set up to collect uniform data on patients who have a particular condition. Very valuable for studying specific diseases in detail.
Okay, so when you put all these sources together, EHRs, claims, PROs, wearables, registries, it paints a very different picture compared to a traditional randomized controlled trial in RCT.
A very different picture indeed. RCTs are, and will likely remain, the gold standard for proving if a treatment works under very specific controlled conditions, cause and effect.
Right. High internal validity, as they say.
Exactly. But RWD reflects, well, the real world. Patients with all sorts of backgrounds, often multiple health conditions, comorbidities.
People who maybe don't take their meds exactly as prescribed.
Right. Variable adherence, people living in diverse environments, all the stuff that's usually carefully controlled out of an RCT.
So RWD has more ecological validity. It reflects reality better.
That's a good way to put it. So the core promises, the big advantages of using RWD.
What are they? What's the payoff?
Well, first, it lets us generate real-world evidence RWE, evidence that's potentially more generalizable, more applicable to the average patient you see in clinic.
Okay, more relevant evidence.
Second, it helps us understand actual treatment patterns. Who's getting what treatment in the real world and maybe why? Things might differ from prescribing guidelines sometimes. Third, capturing that patient experience more completely, like we talked about with PROs.
Right.
Ultimately, it's about building this 360-degree view, seeing health and disease as they truly happen, day in, day out.
So it really sounds like more than just a small step forward. You used the word revolution earlier.
I think it warrants it. It's not just an incremental tweak. The analysis of RWD is genuinely catalyzing innovation across the board in healthcare.
Okay, let's get concrete then. As of today, May 9th, 2025, where are we seeing this impact? Let's start with making new medicines, drug discovery and development.
Right. Developing drugs is notoriously long, expensive, and frankly risky. RWD is helping on multiple fronts here.
How so?
Well, for starters, understanding the disease itself better. Analyzing RWD from lots of different people helps researchers see how a disease naturally progresses in the real world.
Okay.
It can highlight unmet needs or maybe identify specific subgroups of patients who might respond differently to treatments. This helps focus drug discovery efforts on the right targets.
So better targeting from the get-go. Makes sense.
Exactly. And then there's designing the clinical trials themselves. RWD can help make the inclusion and exclusion criteria more realistic.
So the trial population looks more like the people who will actually use the drug eventually.
Precisely. It can also help find geographic locations where there are lots of potentially eligible patients, which can speed up the recruitment process, often a major bottleneck.
Okay, making trials more efficient. What about that idea of synthetic controls you mentioned?
Ah, yes, that's a really exciting area, especially for rare diseases where finding enough patients for a traditional placebo or standard of care comparison group is incredibly difficult, sometimes impossible.
So you use RWD instead.
Essentially, yes. You carefully select and match real-world patients from EHRs or claims data who are receiving the current standard care, and you use their outcomes as a comparator for the patients in the trial receiving the new investigational drug.
That sounds complex to get right.
It is. It requires sophisticated methods and very careful handling, but it offers a potential path forward for testing drugs in situations where traditional RCTs are just not feasible.
Really innovative. Any other ways RWD helps in development?
Yes, understanding patient heterogeneity, recognizing that not everyone responds the same way.
Right.
By analyzing RWD, we can start to identify Biomarkers, maybe genetic factors, maybe lifestyle characteristics that predict who's likely to benefit most from a drug or who might be at higher risk of side effects.
Which leads towards more personalized medicine even in the development stage.
Exactly, tailoring the development process itself.
Okay, so RWD is helping find targets, design trials, create comparators, and personalized development. What about after a drug is approved and on the market? Safety.
This is a huge area where RWD is critical, post-market surveillance or pharmacovigilance.
Because trials, even big phase 3 trials, might miss rare side effects.
Exactly. They're just not usually large enough or long enough to detect very infrequent adverse events. RWD allows for ongoing monitoring across much larger populations over longer periods.
How does that work in practice?
Well, take the FDA Sentinel initiative, for example. It actively monitors huge healthcare databases claims, EHRs looking for potential safety signals with approved medical products.
So it's actively searching, not just waiting for reports to come in.
Correct. It's active surveillance. If an unexpected pattern emerges, say a higher rate of a certain event in people taking a specific drug, the system can flag it much earlier than relying solely on spontaneous reports from doctors or patients.
And that allows for quicker action.
Yes, it can lead to faster updates to drug labels, safety communications to doctors and patients, or other regulatory actions to protect public health. RWD provides that essential long-term safety net.
That's incredibly important. Okay, we've covered development and safety. How is RWD pushing forward personalized medicine in actual clinical practice?
It builds directly on what we discussed in development. By analyzing RWD from vast numbers of diverse patients, we deepen our understanding of individual disease paths and treatment responses.
So seeing how different kinds of people fare with different treatments.
Precisely. We can identify combinations of factors, maybe genetics, lifestyle choices, other conditions someone has, that influence how well a treatment works for them, or their risk of side effects.
And turn that knowledge into, what? Better
Yeah.
predictions.
Yes, exactly. Develop predictive models, tools that can help estimate an individual patient's likely response to a therapy or their risk profile.
So the clinician can use that to make a more tailored decision.
That's the goal. Moving beyond the average patient from the clinical trial and making a more informed choice based on that specific individual's characteristics and predicted outcomes in a real-world setting. It's about tailoring the therapy for maximum benefit and minimum harm for that person.
Using the wisdom of the crowd to help the individual. That's powerful. What about improving the healthcare system overall? Delivery, efficiency.
RWD is hugely valuable there too. Think about identifying best practices
How?
by comparing outcomes. Let's say you look at different hospitals using slightly different approaches for the same procedure. Analyzing RWD can show which methods tend to lead to better results in the real world.
So systems can learn from each other based on actual outcomes.
Yes, it can also help optimize how clinics or hospitals work, reduce errors, use resources better.
Like figuring out patient flow in the emergency room.
That's a great example. Understanding those patterns using RWD can help pinpoint bottlenecks and make changes to cut down wait times or improve efficiency.
And bigger picture, public health.
Absolutely. RWD is crucial for tracking how well prevention programs are working, monitoring disease outbreaks, and, very importantly, identifying and addressing health disparities between different communities or demographic groups. It helps us see where the system might be failing certain populations.
So it's about continuous learning and improvement across the whole system, fueled by data from everyday practice.
That's the idea, a continuously learning health system.
Okay, this all sounds fantastic. Almost too good to be true sometimes. But I imagine wrestling with all this data isn't easy. What are the big hurdles, the day-to-day challenges?
Oh, definitely. Realizing the full potential of RWD involves tackling some significant complexities. A major one is just the sheer variety of the data. Data heterogeneity.
Meaning it comes from all those different sources we talked about?
Exactly. Different sources, different formats, different coding systems used like ICD codes for diagnoses, LOINC for labs. It's not standardized.
So trying to combine data from, say, 2 different hospital systems might be really difficult.
It can be, yes. It requires a lot of effort to standardize and harmonize the data, cleaning it up, mapping different codes to mean the same thing.
Are there ways to do that? Tools or standards?
Yes, thankfully. There are initiatives like the OMOP Common Data Model, which provides a standard structure to transform data from various sources into a consistent format that makes large-scale analysis across different databases feasible, but it takes work.
So step 1 is getting the data to even talk to each other. What's next? Is the data itself always Good.
That's the next big challenge: data quality, completeness, and potential biases. Remember, most RWD isn't collected for research initially.
Right, it's collected for clinical care or billing.
Exactly. So it might be incomplete. Maybe certain tests weren't ordered or information wasn't recorded consistently. There can be errors. Missing data is a common issue.
And biases, what kind?
Things like selection bias. Maybe the patients whose data ends up in a particular database aren't representative of the whole population. Or information bias. Maybe certain conditions are recorded more accurately than others.
So you can't just take the data at face value.
Absolutely not. You need rigorous data curation, checking, cleaning, understanding the limitations, and you have to be transparent about those limitations when reporting results. It's crucial for valid findings.
Okay, so messy data, potentially incomplete or biased data. What about actually analyzing it? You mentioned causality earlier.
Yes, the methodological considerations are huge. Drawing causal conclusions, saying A caused B from observational RWD, is tricky.
Because there's no randomization, like in an RCT.
Precisely. Without randomization, there's always the risk of confounding unmeasured factors that are linked to both the treatment or exposure and the outcome.
So you might see a link, but it's not actually causal.
Right. Maybe patients who get a certain drug are also healthier in other ways you didn't measure, and that's why they have better outcomes, not the drug itself.
So how do researchers deal with that?
We use advanced statistical methods, techniques like propensity score matching, instrumental variable analysis, ways to try and mimic randomization or control for those confounding factors statistically.
But it's not perfect.
It requires careful application, a lot of assumptions, and deep expertise. And even then, you have to be cautious. That old saying, correlation does not equal causation, is like the mantra of RWD analysis. You always have to keep it in mind.
Okay, that's critical. What about the really sensitive stuff? Privacy, security, ethics. We're talking about people's personal health information here.
Absolutely paramount. This is probably the most critical challenge. The data is incredibly sensitive.
So how do you protect patient privacy?
Robust de-identification techniques are essential, removing names, addresses, anything that could directly identify someone. Data often needs to be stored and analyzed in highly secure environments.
Like lockdown servers.
Yes, and sometimes using approaches like federated learning, where the analysis algorithms go to the data rather than pooling all the raw data in one place. Strong governance frameworks are non-negotiable.
Complying with regulations like GDPR or IPFE.
Exactly. And oversight from ethical review boards or institutional review boards, IRBs, is crucial to ensure the research is conducted responsibly and ethically.
Okay.
Protecting patient trust is fundamental.
It really has to be. Are there solutions emerging for these challenges? You mentioned OMOP, advanced statistics.
Yes, the field is constantly evolving. AI and machine learning are being used more and more, not just for analysis, but also to help improve data quality, automate harmonization, and even potentially identify and adjust for certain biases.
So AI can help clean up the data too.
It shows promise there, and there's also growing momentum behind collaborative efforts, researchers, data holders, regulators working together to develop best practices for how to conduct high-quality, reliable RWD studies.
So despite the hurdles, there's a lot of work going into making RWD more robust and trustworthy.
Definitely. The challenges are real, but so is the commitment to overcoming them.
Okay, looking ahead then, what's on the horizon? What are the really exciting future directions for RWD?
The future looks incredibly bright, I think. One major trend is the deeper integration of RWD with other types of data,
Like what?
particularly omics data, genomics, proteomics, metabolomics.
So linking detailed clinical RWD from someone's health record with their genetic code or the proteins in their blood.
Exactly. Imagine the power of connecting that deep biological information with long-term clinical outcomes seen in RWD. It could unlock completely new insights into why diseases develop and how we can personalize treatments at a molecular level.
That sounds like a massive leap.
Yeah.
What about AI's role going forward?
AI and machine learning will become even more embedded, I believe. Their ability to sift through these enormous, complex RWD sets and find subtle patterns or predict future outcomes is just beginning to be tapped.
Identifying things humans might just miss.
Potentially, yes. Generating new hypotheses for researchers to test, developing much more accurate predictive models for disease risk or treatment success.
And you mentioned democratization earlier. How might RWD empower more people?
Well, as tools and access potentially become easier, it could allow a wider range of researchers, maybe even clinicians in smaller practices or public health officials, to leverage RWD for their own questions.
Spreading the ability to do this kind of research.
hopefully,
Yeah.
and also empowering patients, really integrating patient-provided data from PROs, from wearables, not just as data points, but involving patients in interpreting what it means, making research truly patient-centered.
That feels like a really important shift. How are the regulators keeping pace? You said they're accepting RW more.
Yes, the evolving stance of regulatory agencies like the FDA here in the US or the EMA in Europe is a huge catalyst.
So
Their increasing willingness to consider RWE for regulatory decisions, maybe expanding the approved uses of a drug, fulfilling safety study requirements, potentially even contributing to initial approvals in some cases.
that sends a strong signal, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. It validates the importance of RWD and incentivizes further investment and development in generating high-quality RWE.
So it all points toward that vision you mentioned earlier, the learning health system.
Exactly, where every patient interaction, every piece of data generated in routine care can contribute to a continuously growing pool of knowledge that improves care for the next patient. RWD is really the foundation for that vision.
This has been, well, a really fascinating deep dive. It's clear RWD isn't just a buzzword. It's a fundamental change in how we gather evidence and understand health.
It really is. Moving beyond those controlled environments to harness the power of data from everyday health experiences. It reflects the complexity and diversity of real life.
And the impact seems huge, speeding up drug development, making medicine safer, enabling more personalized treatments, improving how healthcare is delivered.
The potential is definitely transformative.
But as we've discussed, it comes with real challenges: data quality, those tricky methodological issues, and the absolute necessity of ethical handling and privacy protection.
Absolutely. It requires diligence, ongoing innovation, and a lot of collaboration between different groups, researchers, clinicians, patients, tech developers, regulators.
So for everyone listening, and whatever your background, whether you're deep in the health field or just curious about the future,
Yeah, think about how this might touch your world.
if you're a researcher or clinician, maybe consider how RWD could add depth to your work, spark new questions.
And if you're a patient, it's worth understanding that your de-identified health information, when shared securely and ethically, is incredibly valuable. It helps advance medicine for everyone.
It's about advocating for that responsible use of data.
Definitely. So thank you for joining us on this exploration today.
Yeah, thanks for tuning in. Keep asking questions, keep learning. Let's unlock the power of this data for a healthier tomorrow.
Well said.
And maybe one final thought for you to take away. As you think about all these possibilities with real-world data, what specific part of it, maybe an application, maybe a potential implication, do you find the most compelling or perhaps the most thought-provoking as we look ahead? Something to chew on.